What is going on, you guys? Ian here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to take your desert landscape photo from this to this in as little time as possible. So going over to the raw image in Adobe Lightroom, first thing you're going to do is go over to the edit panel, and the best thing to do is to switch the color profile from Adobe Color to Adobe Landscape. Makes everything nice and rich and gets you off to a good start. Next thing you're going to want to do, for most cases, it doesn't make too much of a difference in this one, but make sure you remove chromatic aberration and enable your lens corrections. Again, this image isn't that affected by it, but your images might. So go ahead and do that before you start editing. Now I know that the exposure for this is pretty much dead on for what it needs to be, but we'll do some lighting adjustments just to make sure the shadows and the highlights are in a good spot. So first, to bring some detail into the sky, I'm going to bring the highlights down by around 50. The shadows are at a decent level right now, but I know that down the line I want them to be a little bit higher than they are, so I'm just going to go ahead and make that adjustment now. And it's important to note that when you're doing these edits yourself, tinker, take as much time as you need, get everything exactly where you want. There's no shame in going back and taking a little extra time. For the sake of the tutorial, we're getting it done now. The whites and the blacks, I know that I need the whites down just a little bit, and then the blacks I'm also going to bring down just subtly because we don't want to bring these too far down. We do want these in the back a little bit further down. For our point curve, we're going to do a pretty basic S-curve, bring out the richness in the image. Not too much high on the highlights, and then I'm actually going to bring this shadow part down over here and then boost it back over here. All right, off to a pretty good spot. And you can go in the direction that I'm going, sort of linear down, or you can start first with getting the color and white balance set up. It's kind of a coin toss, whatever your preference is, but if you have a cloud in the sky, that is a great spot to select your white balance coloring, and this should make it a little bit warmer. And hey presto, it is done. So 6,250 for Kelvin for our temperature. That's pretty good. You may want to bring it down a little bit depending on your personal preference, but I'm just going to leave it there for now. Our purples and our pinks, there's very little that's going to be affected in this image, so I'm going to leave those just as standard where they are. Next, with our reds, I'm going to do a little bit of an adjustment, bring them a little bit more towards the oranges, and I'm going to bring the luminance down a little bit so that they're rich. I'm going to do a slight boost with the saturation as well. And then I'm going to do a little bit of the opposite with the oranges. I'm going to make them a little bit more rosy red. And I am going to bring the saturation up on those. And luminance I'm going to leave pretty much where it is. The yellows, this is going to have a pretty major effect on the image as a whole. It's going to affect everything from the rock over here to the bush, grass, trees, whatever all this stuff is. So I want to make them a little bit warmer than they are at the moment. That's sort of the vibe that was going on when I took this photo on a rafting trip through Cataract Canyon. So we've got these just a little bit warmer. We're going to boost the saturation there. It's affecting the rest of the image too, but not quite as drastically. And I'm going to bring the illumination down, the luminance down by about 15. I think that's a good level. The greens, there's not going to be too much of an effect, just only on this section. I'm going to make them a little bit more yellow in the hue. I'm going to bring the saturation down a little bit, and then I'm going to boost the luminance. Why? Because I found that it looked good that way. You got a trial and error on this stuff. The teal didn't make too much of a difference, but the blue did. So we are going to increase the saturation of that. Not quite that high, about 20. And then we're going to bring the luminance down to about 20 as well. I also liked to increase it towards the magenta side rather than the teal. Okay, so those are about all the color mixer options that we're going to be changing. Next, I'm going to bring the vibrance down by about 10, and then I'm going to do a plus 20 saturation. And as you can see, it really starts to come alive there. In fact, I want a little bit more life out of the sky, so I'm just going to boost that saturation a bit as well. We are going to get a little bit more color popping when we move down to our next stage, which is dehazing. It kind of brings a little bit more life into this back area, and it'll bring some detail into the sky. So we're going to put that at about a 10 to 12. Let's go for 12. And as you can see, that's just made everything a little bit less hazy in this area. It's brought just a little bit more life into the sky, and it's not done too much to bringing this more foregroundy area super contrasty. Next, I like to bring the clarity down just a bit. The reason for that is that it gives this nice glow. So I'll over-exaggerate that so you can see. Just nice and ethereal with there. But obviously we don't want it that bad. We still want it to look like it did on the day. So I'm going to bring it to about -20. So if you look for it, there's still a little bit of that glow, but it's not overbearing. I also like to increase the texture just to recover a little bit of those finer details so that they still shine through that glow in there. And actually I'm going to bring the clarity down just a bit more to about 15. I'm happy with how that's looking. Another thing we can do to bring some detail into the sky and also just direct more focus towards the center weight of this photo is by increasing or adding a vignette. So I'm going to do that now. Nothing crazy, about a -12. You can see where it's being affected if I turn the feather down, and I kind of like it where it is. I like that amount of reduction, but I am going to increase the feather to 60 instead of 50. So I'm liking how that is looking. Sharpening, don't really need it, but I always put it at about 60.8, 45, and then between 70 and 90 for the masking. And I know that this one is about 70. So, if you're looking at the photo, it didn't make too big of a difference, but if you get really in the nitty-gritty on your photos and you want to make them a little sharper, that will make a pretty big difference. All right, so we're nearly there where we want to be. The last thing I want to do is just make this a little bit brighter, just because it was getting kind of dark in this foreground area. As you can see, we're actually crushing some of the blacks. I think it's in this area over here. So we're going to raise the blacks back up till we see that blue arrow disappear. Maybe boost some of the shadows. A little bit more, and right about there. And then because we lost that, I'm gonna increase the contrast just a bit. And I'm actually gonna just cheat a little bit and raise that up so that we don't have that showing. So we're at a pretty good stage. Maybe drop this a bit again just to make it look a little bit more natural. Drop those blacks down, final little tinkering of the edit. All right, I am pretty happy with how that looks. This is where we came from. This is where we are, and if we compare it to the super meticulously edited, very, very subtle difference. So this one might have a little bit more detail to show off, but for 9 minutes of editing, this is about as good as one can expect. So hopefully that process shows you how to use Lightroom, and now you have a little bit more knowledge and a little bit more of a guide of how to edit your own desert photos. So happy editing. Bye-bye.